Hello, I am Councilwoman Dr. LaShawn Burr-Danley. This year, the City of Douglasville is celebrating 150 years. Can you believe that? So we are doing something different with Continuing Moments. You're about to hear an interview from someone who had a chance to work around Dr. King, to work with the civil rights leaders, to write about the sit-ins, write about when Dr. King went to Memphis. You're going to enjoy hearing the voice and the interview of Mr. William B. Osborne. Now, Mr. Osborne was the city manager for the city of Douglasville for 25 years. He's retired, but his mind is sharp. This is going to be a wonderful, great story. So stay tuned and don't miss it. Take care.
Hello, I'm Robin Reed, and I'm here today to welcome you to Continuing Moments in African American History. And I'm honored today to be speaking with none other than Mr. Bill Osborne. Good morning.
Good morning. It's great to be here.
So I want to start with, obviously, for lack of a better term, I would say you're a legend here in Douglasville and Douglas County. You have a storied history of working with the city, obviously, for, I believe, nearly 25 years as city manager, which is a feat in itself. But we want today to kind of talk about why you have played such a significant part in African American history. Obviously, when people think of Black History Month, certain names come up, which we understand, but there's this whole tapestry of folks behind the scenes, and you are one of those people. So I kind of want to talk about, give us a little bit of your upbringing. I understand that you grew up in Watkinsville. So kind of tell us about your upbringing. What was that like? Because now, if I may say, you are 85 years old.
Yes.
Or years young. And you've done so much, and so many people speak highly of you. Tell us a little bit about your history, how you came to be Bill Osborne.
Well, my father was in education, and he had moved back to Watkinsville, which is just south of Athens. That was where he grew up. We moved there when I was less than a year old. And so the first 4 years of school, I went to in Watkinsville. My father was grades 1 through 11. Of course, the schools were segregated at that time. There was Watkinsville High School and Bogart High School, and then there was the African American school for the county. And one of my first really hit me in terms of the effects of desegregation and the way the African Americans were treated in the South, basically at that time, was, and I was a bookworm, and so after my second grade and after the third grade, I had a summer job that made a little money with for my father, and my job was to go through every school book that the students had used that year in the white school. And I had to make one of three decisions: that the book was still in good enough condition to stay in the white school for the next year, or it was in such bad shape they would send it to what at that time was the all-black school, or it was so bad that it couldn't even go to the all-black school. And I found myself being troubled by that, and that has stuck with me all my life as being kind of the point that I became much more aware of what existed in the South in terms of segregation, and but my rest of my school year or school life, which was in Winder, the last 5 years. Of course, the schools were segregated at that time. I went to University of Georgia, was anxious to move into journalism. I finished at Georgia in 3 years, by taking extra courses, and there were no African American students at the University of Georgia at that time. In fact, I tell people that I'm a member of the last graduating class of the all-white University of Georgia. That was in the end of summer school of 1960. And Hamilton Holmes and Charlene Hunter integrated the University of Georgia that next January, when I had started my career as a reporter at the Atlanta Journal. So, but that is a little bit of my growing up and perception of things. And I did an internship at the Atlanta Journal in the summer of '59. And among other things, now the sit-in movement was largely over at that time, but I got acquainted with some of those student leaders later. But the Freedom Rides were taking place, and I covered that as a reporter, just from the Atlanta with the riders when they would come through Atlanta and everything.
So in covering the Freedom Riders, how did that impact you after seeing what you saw as a child in the public school system, the segregation, the separation? Now, fast forward, you're covering the Freedom Rides. How did that impact you?
Well, and of course, a lot of things were going on at that time. And like I say, you had the lunch counter demonstration sit-ins, and that largely was over. But here we had basically students, black and white, that were boarding buses to go through the South, riding the buses together. And at that point, any African American, when they got on the bus, they were to go to the back of the bus and be seated there. And there were, of course, violence against these students, including one bus that came through Douglasville that was burned right after it got into Alabama. But I was impressed, obviously, with the zeal of those students. And at the same time, even when I did the internship with the Atlanta Journal, began to be acquainted with some of the key people in the African American community.
Now, you mentioned earlier that you were part of a joint project with Emory University, Morris Brown College, Atlanta University, and Atlanta Public Schools. Tell us about that. What was your role in that project?
Well, this is just a fast forward. I was a reporter at the Atlanta Journal for about 2 years, and then was promoted to be assistant city editor. Far too young to be in that position. I was 22, and 2 days a week I was running the city room with about 25 reporters. The DeKalb County government offered me the position of head of their public information office for $150 a week. I was making $95 a week at the Atlanta Journal. And they told me that I had a great future there, and if I promised to stay at least one more year, I could get a $10 a week raise. That's when I left my reporting career. And I worked for DeKalb County as to head up their public information office. When the commission chairman was defeated, that job was going to be given to the other political group. And I was hired by Mayor Ivan Allen to be City of Atlanta's first public information office. And I was there for about a year, and that really didn't pan out as far as I was concerned. I was more doing internal reports. And I had an opportunity to go to work for a joint project of Atlanta University, Emory University, and the Atlanta school system. So that's how I had my initial connection with AU. The dean of the School of Education to start with was Dr. Horace Mann Bond, Julian Bond's father. And then the moved on to a different gentleman, Dean Ed Weaver, and that's who I worked with and had a non-teaching faculty appointment at AU for a couple of years.
So this is during the time of SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee.
That had really, I knew virtually all of the initial people involved in Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, but they had largely gone off the scene. Ironically, Julian Bond, that I was fairly well acquainted with, we were both young reporters. The last time, this is hard to believe, but the last time I saw Julian Bond was he and I were at the Atlanta airport on a Saturday night covering a story with some officials that had flown into Atlanta from Africa. That was before he was elected to the legislature, and all the things that he was involved in up to the time he was the head of the NAACP and died, but I never had any contact with him other than when we were very young and reporters at the same time.
That's very interesting because obviously you both have, created milestones in your life, your careers, the impact you've made on the community. Have you tried to reach out to each other, or
we never did. I've actually, if you look at my history, mostly when I've moved on and haven't looked back much. But I did have, that was the experience that I had with the Atlanta school system, Emory University, Atlanta University, and our offices were on the campus of Morris Brown College. And I'm glad to see Morris Brown College being rejuvenated. I was especially fond of Dr. John Middleton, who was the president of that educational institution. That was long years ago, obviously. When you've reached 85, a lot of things are in the past.
So looking at the history of Atlanta and how it's evolved to having Black elected officials, and looking back over all that you witnessed as a young reporter, the organizations you connected with, the individuals like Julian Bond's father, all of those significant figures, what are your thoughts on where we are now and kind of how we got here?
Right. Well, if I go back, for example, when I was hired by Mayor Allen to be the city's first public information officer, there were no, and I'm going to say this, and I think I'm correct, there were no professional employees, African Americans, at City Hall. The only positions that they had were more custodial type positions. Now, that changed rather quickly over the next 4 or 5 years, but that was the case. I can remember when the Atlanta City Council I think there were 2 African Americans on the City Council. That was it. I remember when Black officers were forbidden to arrest white people who had possibly committed a crime. Mm-hmm. And if you look at history from the standpoint of, as I look back 85 years, a lot of things happened very quickly over that had been needing to happen, brewing a little bit, but it kind of exploded, in the 60s and 70s.
Mm-hmm. So let's look at Douglasville, Douglas County. Someone who's grew up here, born and raised in Douglasville. I can attest to seeing the evolution of African Americans in city government, county government. What was it that attracted you to the position of city manager? And having served so long, obviously, you've been a part of the evolution of city government here and the great things that have been happening here in Douglas County. What was it that attracted you to that position and made you stay so long, quite frankly?
Right. Well, let me back up just a minute. Is that when after I had left that position we talked about with the city of Atlanta, And I worked for the Rockdale County School System for a couple of years as kind of a special assistant and special projects manager. And then I did consulting work for several years that we'll come back to later. But reached the point and I worked for an organization, the Council of State Governments, became the executive director of the Southern Governors Association. My first chairman was Governor George Wallace. My second chairman was the only African American to be chairman of the Southern Governors Conference, and that was Governor Melvin Evans of the U.S. Virgin Islands. That was in the 70s. And then they decided they wanted me in Washington all the time. And my wife was a successful businesswoman, so I said, I can't move to Washington. I was spending half my time there anyway. So I resigned, and so I had to find something to do. And so I had done consultant work before, and so I was working with a small firm, and Douglasville was a client. So I don't know that I had ever been in Douglasville other than passing through on I-20 until the day I came out to start a project for this consulting firm for the city, because the city of Douglasville had a big grant that was being investigated by the GBI, and the funds had been cut off. And my job basically was to see if we could get the funds flowing again and get the city out of trouble. That was, in the mid-'80s. And I did consultant work for the city a good bit for about 4 years. Then ironically didn't do anything for Douglasville for about a year. And got a call from Nick Banks, who was the city manager. And he said, aren't you about tired of chasing rabbits? And I said, I think I am. He said, well, we want you to come to work for the city. We're not sure what we want you to do or what your title would be, but we want you working for the city. So I did. And unbeknownst to me, he was planning to step down as city manager and be finance director. So I became city manager, I think it was 1991, and I just stayed. And my wife and I, we moved from the Covington area and been here ever since.
So give us some idea of what have been some of the highlights, obviously, in your long career as city manager. What have been some of those significant nuggets that you kind of felt like, I'm in the right place, I'm making a difference, I'm making a positive impact? What were some of those moments?
Well, a lot of what I see as accomplishments we had are growth related. When I became city manager in Douglasville, I think Douglasville's population was like 13,000 people. And when I left about 10 years ago now, it was more than 35,000, I think, or about 35,000. So we had a lot of things that we dealt with growth. We managed to get a major project to renovate Mill Village community. The first project I worked on as a consultant out here was on the north side, a community development block grant. So the growth of the city, we were involved in moving City Hall to where it is now, in what had been a department store before. We built the downtown conference center, expanded the city limits all the way to the Cobb County line. And so when you look at Douglasville city limits, the county at that point was not much interested in growth and development, and we saw the potential. So the only way to get it done was annexation. Now the county subsequently has done a very good job, I think, of economic development and growth. But if you look at Douglasville city limits, the reason it's so strange and goes all the way and includes New Manchester and everything was because we kind of took the bull by the horns to make the city grow. I guess the other thing that I would point to is I think we greatly upgraded the staff. We hired a young lady several years ago to be the Main Street manager. And I have to admit that when I was told that she was probably the one I needed to look at, I was not sure about hiring an African-American woman to be the downtown development director. But I said, okay, I'm going to take a chance on Marcia Hampton. And, of course, she turned out to be an absolute jewel. And after she'd been here about 4 years, I called her into my office one day. And I said, Marcia, how would you like to be a city manager someday? And after recovering from her shock, she decided that she'd like that. And so I trained her to be my successor. And shortly before I retired from here, before I went to Temple, I was just retiring from here, though, is that she was the assistant city manager. And it was clear that she was going to become the city manager. I told her that if she'd get involved in the Georgia City County Managers Association, that in 5 years she would become the president. And 4 years later, I got to stand beside her. She was sworn in as president-elect. Wow. So she's quite a person that hold in high esteem. And the two people that I wanted to be sure to get in director positions before I retired was her as to be the city manager and Gary Sparks to be the police chief. And both of them have done a very good job.
Amazing. So that's two more people I hear you've more or less helped mentor, because there's another city council member, Dr. LaShawn Bird-Danley, who first initially told me about the impact you've had on her professionally and personally. How important is it to you as someone in leadership with so much experience to sort of help guide the ones coming behind you?
Well, I think that's extremely important, and I always tried to do that. That I always looked upon, and from what I've said to you this morning, you know, I've never stayed in any place very long until I got to Douglasville. And I think that was a combination of being comfortable here and being older. But until I came to work here, the longest I'd ever worked anywhere was like 7 years. And when I changed, I generally was making a major change to do something a good bit different. But I felt like that it's important to make sure we had a good local government going forward here. And I was very comfortable at the time I decided to retire, and actually felt that if I had looked at staying on here longer than I needed to, that Marcia Hampton, she would have gone somewhere else because she would have, she's that good.
Well, she had a great teacher.
And with, you mentioned Councilmember Bird-Danley, I had known her, of course, as a member of the council. Mm-hmm. But what really impressed me about Councilmember Dr. Danley was my wife. I had a wonderful wife for 43 years. I was pretty much of an athletic nerd. She played professional basketball after high school. She was 8 years older than I. She had started several businesses, made a lot of money, started several businesses, lost a lot of money. She was an entrepreneur. But she had multiple myeloma cancer. And Councilmember Danley and Judge Barbara Caldwell, the last 4 years of Jane's life, they were just tremendous friends of hers. And so I recognized along that way that Dr. Danley, Councilmember Danley, a very special person. I consider her my best friend and think very highly of her.
Excellent. So it sounds like not only professionally you planted your feet here, but your heart has been here in Douglasville and Douglas County for many years.
It's home, and live by myself. I've got a cat, Blue, that never wanted a cat, was a dog person, but I had some mice, rat infections. This was about 5 years ago, and Councilmember Danley's mother, Mama Sarah, she had cats that lived under a house, and they had a litter that one of them had been rejected, and Councilmember Danley had taken that kitten home, and so she brought the kitten over to my house, and I called her the next day. I said, "You got to come get this cat. I'm a dog person. Come get this cat." But 4 or 5 days later, I'm attracted to the cat, and that's been, like, say, 5 or 6 years ago. Blue is now a 17-pound cat that rules the house. It's just me and him there.
So it's been so interesting hearing about your professional life. What is it that you would like to share for those who may have worked with you over the years, feel like they know Bill Osborne? What's something personally about you that we may not know that may be surprising or interesting or quirky?
I don't know. I've done a lot of different things, as has been stated. That one of the areas that I didn't mention, that when the Governors Association, when I resigned from it because I didn't want to move to Washington, and the Lord was leading me into a Christian ministry, and there was a column written about me, and I think it was the Raleigh News and Observer, because I went to work for an organization, the International Christian Embassy Jerusalem, headquartered in Jerusalem. And he closed the column by saying that after a decade of being of comfort to Southern governors, that now was going to be a comfort to Israel. And I had 2 great years, traveled all over the United States trying to build up support groups for this Christian ministry headquartered in Jerusalem. So, like I said, that's one of the other things that I've done in life. So the Lord's blessed me by being able to do a number of things. And I was somewhat amazed that once I got into city management here and was here about 25 years, I was very surprised that I stayed anywhere that long.
So let's look at the climate of our country right now. Obviously, there's some folks say we're very divided. What are your thoughts now on what's happening? There are some folks who feel like we may go backwards, when we talk about how you've seen the civil rights movement. Why is it so important for us to understand our history, African-American history, which is American history? Because a lot of folks, we're talking about Black History Month, and you're one of those faces that they did not know. You're part of that tapestry of the civil rights movement. You helped cover the events of the time and brought the story to the public to help us know what was going on. Why is it so important for us to know the history, teach it to our children, and what are your thoughts on what's happening today? How can we move forward in a positive way? I know that's a loaded question and a lot for you to answer, but it's such an interesting time in our history.
Right.
What are your thoughts about
Well, I think it's a very pivotal time in our history for sure, and I have great concerns as to what may happen. Just praying that the Lord would provide guidance to the president and the key people, and that they would make correct decisions, good decisions, decisions that are in the best interest of the overall country and not a particular group. Do have a lot of concerns as to what may happen. I'm on the one hand, I've been active at different times in my life with Democrats and with Republicans. I tend to be more of a liberal than a conservative, but do pray for the new administration, but have a lot of concerns in terms of what it may mean in terms of possible discrimination for various reasons. But just pray that the leaders will hear from men and women of God and will be concerned and do what's best for this country, for all the people of this country.
Excellent. Well, I still say, Mr. Osborne, I'm going to wait for your book to come out because you have a wealth of information to share, and it's just been so inspiring to hear your story. So thank you so much for your time with us today. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it, and it's good to be here. God bless you.
You as well.